The Ice Cream Man. Back in my high school years, I'd often meet with a few friends at a local Dunkin' Donuts, which was conveniently near a railway we'd all take to our friend's house. My closest friend at the time, Katie, and I usually met up earlier than everyone else just to hang out, order our extra large drinks, and hash browns. I'd consider us pretty naive and overly nice girls, which never proved to be an issue to either of us until we were nice to the wrong person. Now for a little background of my hometown. I grew up in the forgotten borough of New York City, Staten Island. For those who are unaware, there was, and kind of still is, a pretty horrendous opioid epidemic. So seeing zombie-like civilians strolling down the streets is fairly common. Because of this, I became pretty good at spotting out someone struggling with drugs and things of the sort. Side note, don't do drugs, everyone. Alright, let's carry on. On this day, Katie and I met up at Dunkin' Donuts and sat at our usual booth. We were in the midst of messing around with our phones and being overly giggly when I noticed out of the corner of my eye someone suddenly stopping outside of the glass door. Still smiling, I glanced over to see if it was maybe one of our friends and ended up making direct eye contact with a basic Staten Island looking dude. I looked away unbothered and carried on. Just another customer anyway. After the guy got his coffee, he sat directly at the table across from our booth. I chose to ignore the fact that he sat weirdly close and resisted eye contact since that already awkwardly happened, but I guess the motion caught Katie's attention as she looked over her shoulder at the man settling in. She looked back at me, made a face that said, okay, and we just giggled and tried to move on. Every now and then, I glance in his direction, mainly just because I like to be observant of my surroundings, but also, I kept seeing him scratch his nose, neck, and face in my peripheral vision, and noticed he was bleeding from various cuts on his body. This was a dead giveaway he was doing some form of drugs, as they tend to get very itchy and scratch until their skin breaks. Side note, don't do drugs and stay in school. Love you guys so much. Alright, let's keep going. A few minutes later, the man asked if one of us had a charger he could borrow. I kindly denied, and Katie only had an iPhone charger, while the man clearly had an Android phone. This slight exchange was enough for the man to feel invited, and he'd continue to make comments for quite some time. Being that this was about 4 years ago, I don't remember the entire conversation, but I do remember him often asking general questions like if we live around here, what we do in our free time, and creepy things of the sort. I was pretty vague yet polite in my responses, but Katie was always a bit more enthusiastic in her words, making it pretty easy for this guy to reciprocate and basically join our conversation altogether. In Katie's innocent stupidity, the guy basically found out some of the main train stops we'd get off at and hang in those areas. He also found out we would indulge in the devil's lettuce, which only made this guy feel even more inclined. At some point, he mentioned how his ex-girlfriend got him into some trouble, served jail time, and pretty recently got out. He also mentioned how he's been an ice cream truck driver ever since his release, and told us that he's always driving around the train stop Katie mentioned earlier. He also repeatedly offered to give us rides around in his truck someday with free ice cream as a bribe. Again, we were pretty naive and overly nice girls, Katie more than I, so one thing led to another, and eventually this guy was asking for Katie's social media, which she happily obliged to. Throughout this entire exchange, I was mostly just nodding, smiling, laughing here and there, so my remaining silent during the social media exchange went unnoticed. However, once the guy started following Katie on Instagram, he quickly found mine through a tagged picture. I wasn't private at the time, so he immediately started liking and commenting on nearly every one of my photos. What a creep. The comments were extremely cringy, consisting of a heart eye and water squirt emojis, and things like, "Damn, ma." Finally, after the longest half hour ever, I urged we should really be catching our train. Fortunately, the man wasn't persistent after that, and we were on our way with no problem. After some verbal recap of what just happened, I convinced Katie to block him, and I did the same. We brushed it off with that. I honestly forgot about the strange interaction until about a week later. I was hanging out with some friends at a park near my high school when I started craving Ralph's ice cream, which was just up the block. I ventured off with one friend and almost completely made it to the store before the sound of an ice cream truck approached from behind us. Completely lost in conversation, my attention was only caught by the high-pitched screeching of the truck's brakes and a somewhat familiar voice. Of course, it was him. He shouted out to me, but with Ralph only a couple feet in front of us, I ignored him and rushed in with my friend. The guy didn't stick around, being that he was blocking the whole lane, but we still called our friend at the park to pick us up in his car. For the next 2 weeks, there were about 4 times this man tried to pick us up in his truck. At this point, making me pretty paranoid, I was potentially being stalked. The last time it happened, he was parked directly outside one of the train stops, almost as if he was waiting for me. He again called out to me, asking why I blocked him and saying that he just wants to be friends. At this point, I had had enough and told him to leave me alone. My dad's a lieutenant, which was a lie. I walked away before he could respond and into the diner I was meeting my friends at that night. I saw his truck drive away in the window and never had an interaction with the ice cream man again. The sound of an ice cream truck has haunted me ever since. Story number 2. This all happened within the last 2 to 3 hours. My mom and I have been trying to catch the ice cream truck all summer, as they have certain ice cream bars that you can't really get anywhere else around here. We were in the middle of watching a show when we suddenly heard the ice cream truck outside. It was loud, signifying that it was close. I got up and went to the door. I saw that it was in front of our house and began to say that it was too late. But I then realized that it was slowing down and not driving away. Now, this wasn't an, "Oh, there's something coming, I should stop, slow down." It was a, "I've been slowing down to a stop since before you even opened the door" type of slowing down. My mom told me to go out and make sure he didn't drive away. It was odd, as it was just about 9 p.m, but we wanted our ice cream. My mom came outside and we ordered. The guy was quiet, but said that he stopped because he heard voices. No one was around, and we were inside when we were talking. It's almost as if he was planning on stopping here. There was an open garage door a few houses down, but no one was there. He was able to find the flavor I asked for, but had some trouble finding the one my mom asked for.
I just saw it. I just ate one.
I figured he was new to the job and just nervous, so I thought nothing of it. We paid and went back inside. Once we got inside, however, I noticed mine was already open. I asked my mom if she had opened it, as she is the one who bought both of the treats. She said no. She offered me hers, as we both knew neither of us wanted to eat an open ice cream bar. But then she noticed that hers was really puffed up, as if it has been blown up with air. We threw both of them away. After thinking about it for a few minutes, it all seemed so weird. At 9 p.m., the music suddenly turned on when we both heard it. It didn't slowly fade away. It slowed to a stop in front of our house before I even opened the door. He was quiet and gave us 2 suspicious ice cream bars. He sped away after that, not stopping for anyone else. Just 15 minutes ago, I called my mom in from the garage to tell her that the cats were trying to catch this bug that looked like a wasp. As she came in, she saw something through the kitchen window. She rushed me to the front door in the next room, and when she opened it, a different car drove away. I didn't see the full thing, but she says it was pulled over with the lights on and quickly peeled out of there as we opened the door. My dad just came home and we told him about everything. He thinks it's odd, but that's about it. The 2 incidents could be 2 totally innocent, coincidental occurrences, but it's too weird. My mom wants me to sleep in the living room on the other couch tonight, just in case something happens. And I have no objections because I'm nervous as hell. Creepy people that we saw tonight, let's not meet again. Story number 3. This story happened when I was 5 years old. Like most kids, I always looked forward to the familiar song of the ice cream man's truck. It was summertime, and the ice cream man would come around somewhat regularly since there were only a few families with children in the area. After getting my ice cream one day, the visits from one specific ice cream man became more and more frequent until he was in my neighborhood literally every single day. My mom has an insanely strong intuition, and she quickly picked up on the fact that something was a little off about this guy. She explained to me that it just wasn't quite right for him to be in the neighborhood every single day, and that I would no longer be able to go and get ice cream from him. 5-year-old me was not pleased with this. A few days passed without any interaction with the ice cream man, even though he was still passing up and down my street. One day, however, he decided to come up to my door and ask for me specifically by name. She was cool and collected at first, but started to get really nervous when the guy refused to leave our front door. I was in the other room, but I could hear him saying things like,
Come on, I brought a gift just for her. Just let me talk to her and give them to her.
I'd never really heard my mom raise her voice at anyone, but she went full-blown mama bear on this guy. She told him to get lost before she called the police, and my father told him to steer clear of our property. At the time, I didn't understand how creepy it was for someone I didn't know who was at least 15 years older than me, then to be bringing me gifts and basically begging to see me. Ice cream man, let's not meet.